YouTube, Big Swope 58 here, and welcome back to my channel. I finally got a chance to go to the range and try out my newly acquired Sig P227. Many of you know, anytime you get a new handgun or a new gun in general, your first trip to the range with it's usually going to be somewhat of a learning experience. So I want to just tell you about some of my first impressions of the gun, what I would call the good and the bad, and even some of the ugly, and talk about some of that. The first thing I want to do is to satisfy all of you safety Sallies out there. Show you that the gun is safe, empty, and cleared, and safe to handle. Okay, so first off, overall impressions of the guns were great. It's a Sig. There's nothing negative to be said about it. Like most all Sig pistols, all that I've ever handled, the gun operated well. Had no real significant issues with it, just a few minor things, and I don't know if it was just me familiarizing myself with the firearm or if it was an issue with the firearm, but I'm sure I'll figure that out as I shoot it more and become more and more familiarized and comfortable with it. The overall fit and feel of the handgun is great. Like I said, I have no issues with it. The feel in hand with these new E2 grips feels phenomenal. I like the overall grip provided by this new style grip package of the E2 grip. The stimpling on it is extremely well. Never felt the gun slip in my hands at all. Even when my palms became sweaty, it still provided plenty of grip. The sights were more than adequate, even on an indoor range. These are the Sig night sights, and I could pick them up extremely well. They have a lot of glow still left in them, so everything about them was good. The function of the gun was basically flawless. I used 3 different types of ammo, which I'll get into a little bit later, but the gun fed, fired, extracted, and ejected every round. The only problems I can honestly say that I had with the gun was the inability of the gun to lock the slide back on an empty magazine, and I've got to figure that one out too. I don't know if it's the magazines or if it's the gun. I actually was very mindful of not allowing my thumb to ride the slide catch and release lever, because that's easy to do with these Sig P series pistols if you're not careful, but it just would not lock the slide back, at least not on every magazine. I have 3 magazines with this gun, and 2 of them wouldn't, and 1 of them would lock the slide back every time, and of the other 2, they were very inconsistent. Sometimes it would, sometimes it wouldn't. So I'm gonna clean these magazines extremely good and examine the followers to make sure it's not a problem with the followers. I'm hoping it's something simple, because that's really pretty annoying. Overall, I had a really good experience with the firearm. The trigger is extremely good. Both the double action and the single action trigger was good. But I've got to get used to this this short reset trigger, or short reach trigger. The previous owner decided that he wanted to install this SRT trigger as opposed to the standard trigger that came with the gun. Now, I'm happy that he did include that the standard trigger with the gun, because I'm probably going to reinstall that and see if I can get a little bit better accuracy out of it. I don't think my hands or my shooting style is well suited for this SRT trigger, and I'll probably be switching it out before my next trip to the range. But like I said, all in all, the gun shot well. I had no issues with it, except the couple of things that I did talk about, and I'll go into that a little bit more in detail. Now, one of the problems that I did experience with this, and I think this is a combination of a couple of things. When I racked new magazines and turned the gun to point and aim, sometimes I would twice I dropped the magazine out of the gun, and after I examined it a little bit further, I realized that you have to really slam, well, not slam it, but you have to really push that magazine in well, because these new E2 grips, they come down and extend beyond the entrance to the magazine well. You're racking inserting a new magazine, that base plate will hit the end of that E2 grip and prevent it from seating properly. So you really have to be deliberate when you insert your new magazine. But all in all, it was a great experience. It was a lot of fun, and I intend to change out the trigger, and on my next trip I'll see if I have a little bit better luck with this firearm. So as I stated before, I took 3 different types of ammo on this last trip to the range, and they were all just target loads. So I expect to have some variation in accuracy between the 3 ammo types. And I think a lot of it wasn't the ammo, a lot of it was probably me trying to get accustomed to that SRT trigger. So I just want to kind of show you what some of my results were. These were my first shots with the gun using AMSCOR 230 grain ball ammo. And from an accuracy standpoint, it really wasn't that bad, except all my shots were coming in somewhat to the left of my point of aim and a bit low. And trying to get used to that SRT trigger, a lot of my shots, at least my initial shots, came in way low, and I think it's because where my finger falls on that SRT trigger, I was actually pulling the muzzle of the barrel down as I was firing my shots. And as I became more accustomed to it, as you can see, my shots started to come up, even though they were still somewhat low and left to my point of aim. But this was out at 8 yards, and these were the first shots that I actually took with the gun. So naturally, I expected them to be a little bit, not to my liking. But I was anticipating and getting better as I shot the gun. Now, my second set of shots was I switched to some of the old Perfecta ammo that I had bought from Walmart some years back. Now, that ammo was made by Tula. I was starting to become a little bit more cognizant of the SRT trigger, and as you can see, my shots are starting to come up to my point of aim and a little more toward the center of the target, though I still experience some aberrant rounds that seem to just drift down low. But I think that was every time I would reload and have to find that sweet spot for my finger on that SRT trigger. But as I shot it, the rounds, I became, a little bit better. But again, these were out at 8 yards. Now as I became more comfortable with the trigger and more comfortable shooting the gun, I drifted my target out to 10 yards and start to become more cognizant of my finger to trigger interaction. And though my groupings aren't that tight, I'm starting to put more of the rounds on target as opposed to them drifting downward, though I still seem to experience some of that, but nowhere near as much. I'm not a person that worry that much about whether I'm shooting a 1-inch group or a 2-inch group or a 3-inch group, and none of that stuff. I know a lot of people do. But I do like to be accurate with my shots. But I believe I'll be much better with it when I switch out that SRT trigger back to the standard trigger that came with the firearm. Okay, now I've switched to the American Eagle, and I drifted the target out to about 12 yards. And initially, I was still having the same issue, so I'm certain it's probably not the ammo. But as you can see, these are my initial shots. And as I became more aware of my finger to trigger interaction, my shots start to come back up more toward my point of aim. And actually, if you're worried about the groupings are starting to get a lot tighter. So actually, I'm starting to improve with the gun. And then this is my last set of shots. Still having some that seem to be I'm nosing down the muzzle, no doubt. And I think that's just a result of me and the SRT trigger. At this point, I'm certain of it, because as I slowed my shot pace down and started making sure that I was repositioning my finger on the trigger, my shots seem to be a lot more consistent, and most all of them are on the target. I think it was a pretty good outing for the first time with the gun. I'll change the trigger out and I'll take it again and see what happens. So all in all, my impressions with this gun is great. I think it's typical of most all Sig handguns. They have excellent build quality, excellent reliability. It's a wonderful gun. I'm not a big fan of the SRT trigger, at least not from my first shots. I'll be switching that out before I take my next trip to the range. So, my overall impressions of this P227, it's an excellent gun. Like most all Sig handguns, it has an excellent build quality, excellent materials, it's extremely reliable. I don't have anything negative to say about it. I think it's a great gun for any of you that like 45 ACP handguns and don't mind one with a somewhat of a thicker grip. I think it's an excellent gun to own. I used to own a P220, which was a single stack 45, which had a narrower grip, but I definitely prefer the wider grip. And these E2 grips are extremely nice. They're extremely comfortable. They provide a really nice, firm purchase on the handgun. And even with a sweaty hand, you can't tell that it's still nice and grippy. But that's all I have on this gun until my next trip, when I'll give you a follow-up. This is Big Swole 58. I appreciate you watching. Signing out.